lateness.
Great. So whenever you're ready, Chair Burt.
Okay, well, good morning. At this time, I'd like to call to order the City School Liaison meeting for August 16th, 2021. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, of course. Board President Darab.
Here.
Board Member DiBrienza.
Here.
Chair Burt.
Here.
Councilmember Tanaka.
Here.
And everyone is present.
Thank you. Our first item is oral communications for any members of the public who would like to speak on items that are not on the agenda. And do we have any speakers?
Yes, Chair Burt, it seems that no one is in attendance. So I believe we do not have any public speakers at this time. Okay.
And our next item is approval of minutes from the August 19th, 2021 meeting. And we have one minor edit from Board Member DiBrienza. And so welcome a motion to approve as amended.
I'll move to approve as amended.
I'll second.
Great. Any abstentions? Then approved by acclamation.
Thanks.
Great. All right. So then we move on to updates from first the superintendent and the city manager. For the superintendent's representative, I don't know who's with us today.
I can go ahead and speak for Dr. Austin.
Great.
He wasn't able to make it today. We don't have too many updates other than, you know, the beginning of school is moving along, and we have not had any COVID related issues that have affected us from proceeding. That was always a concern, right? What was going to happen as we moved along with school. And in fact, the COVID rates in our schools are very low and continue to decrease. There's been no in-school transmission. You know, for example, last week there were 3 cases, 2 students and a staff member. That's pretty consistent. We have not seen any spread. So those are all community transmissions outside of the school that we're catching, and then we're mitigating from spreading. So everything is working well in terms of safety. Everyone is thrilled to be on campus, students and teachers, and we're sort of, you know, back to normal as much as normal can be, which is a great place to be for our students.
Great, thank you. And city manager's office updates.
Yes, just briefly, we also are just moving along, trying to continue the COVID protocols, et cetera, that we have. One of the newer things I think that's worth mentioning here is we are expanding our library hours for the libraries that have been open. And so we're really excited about that. We've been hearing a lot of positive feedback from the community and just grateful to have that public space available again. So I can pull up a link to where those hours are, but I believe it's a little bit earlier for Mitchell Park is that on for sure. And then of course we continue doing testing at City Hall on Wednesdays and Mitchell Park on Tuesdays. And so those are free and open to the public if anyone would like to get COVID tested. So that's it. A lot of the other things the council members will cover because there's been a lot going through the legislative body here at the city. So I'll leave those to the 2 of you.
Thank you. Board members, any additional updates on your board meetings and actions?
The one update is, you know, we have continued or started in-person meetings that is open to the public. So our first meeting open to the public was 2 days ago, and it went very smoothly. What we've done is we have a vaccination requirement to enter the boardroom. proof of vaccination has to be shown, and that's consistent with our campus policies for the general public. So if volunteers want to come onto our campuses, they have to have proof of vaccination. And that's just the policy we've adopted for our board meetings, because we have an alternative for public participation, which is the virtual meeting, which we've been doing for the last 18 months. So we call it sort of a hybrid meeting. You can come in person if you can meet the requirements and you have to be masked up inside. You can participate virtually, as we've been doing all along. And we've merged our commenting system into a single system, so that whether you're commenting virtually or in person, it's sort of seamlessly blended together. And it worked great. We had a couple of members of the public show up in person, and it was nice. So that's one update on process. The other update is the staff has identified at the last meeting certain priority areas for what, the PAUSD promise is what we call our guiding document. And staff identified certain priorities, and they include things like mental health and wellness for the next year, which is a part of the promise, but a particular priority given that we are now transitioning from being generally isolated at home to being back on campuses. And then another one, which is service to others, which is going to be an emphasis of the next school year. And there are a few more. You can find those online. But those are the updates for now. I'm sure we'll have more, but other than that, a bunch of minor board policies relating to various different things that got pushed through. Maybe Jennifer has something else to add.
I was just going to mention the PAUSD promise and how nice it is to be talking about it again, right? Or like, it's like regular, it's like the before time again. We're not just talking about ventilation and masks and spacing and vaccinations. We're talking about mental health and attendance and reading. So it's nice to feel a little bit back to normal, just with masks and some precautions. But that's it.
The one other thing I will raise that did come up in the meeting, which is really excellent, was a presentation about our family engagement specialists. And you may be familiar with our family engagement specialists who work one-on-one with students and families in our district, and mostly historically underrepresented students. And I mean, it's a fantastic program, and we received a presentation about how that program, how this family engagement specialist had worked with a family and worked with a student to actually bring them into the fold during this time when it was very difficult to engage, for students to engage. And it had a real concrete impact on this one student's trajectory. And then also, post-graduation trajectories of students and where they've gone. And I mean, it was really great to hear. Those are the kinds of qualitative metrics that are so important for us as a board to hear, because data is great, but the underlying human impacts are just as important. And so that was pretty fantastic.
Well, I wasn't aware of that program, and that sounds really great. Is there an intention to do long-term kind of tracking of impacts to the degree that you can compare them to a baseline?
I don't know the degree to which that will happen. I know the intention, the desire is there. I'm not sure the specifics of how that tracking is happening, but yeah, that would be a goal, definitely.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. And that's interesting. On your first open in-person public meeting, we had intended to move into a hybrid mode starting after our summer break. We rescinded that because of the Delta spike, and we're just now trying to figure out when we will move forward on a hybrid mode, and we haven't decided that. So that's interesting that you have had that success. A few updates from the council standpoint. We late last month had a meeting on the grade separations at East Meadow and Charleston, and did both some narrowing, but also gave direction on next steps of what additional information, technical studies and otherwise are going to be needed to go in our next phases. But once again, those grade crossings have a great deal of impact on school kids, on their routes to school. And we have a rail committee that we had not had meetings so far this year, and we're expecting that we'll be having an upcoming meeting. And so I want to make sure that the district is invited and encouraged to participate as much as possible in that, because the alternatives do affect safe routes to school. And related to that, you may or may not know, but we've on the county VTA sales tax measure in 2016 had a large amount of money devoted, $700 million in 2017 dollars devoted to the 8 grade crossings between Sunnyvale and Palo Alto, of which 4 reside in Palo Alto. And it had been unresolved how those dollars would be allocated. There was a lot of concern that cities that were further along in their planning and even upcoming construction process would be able to have a disproportionate share of those dollars. And that issue has now been resolved. We are going to receive proportionate a share of those dollars in proportion to the number of grade crossings we have in our community. They've now in 2020 dollars, it was up to 840 million. So Palo Alto stands to receive in probably over $400 million for that. And we're going to have good latitude in terms of how to utilize those dollars and when we would utilize them. By no means are those dollars as big a numbers as those are. They aren't enough to accomplish the grade crossings that we're pursuing. So there'll be a lot of effort to look at both leveraging those dollars for other regional, state, federal dollars, and what local share contribution we will have to come up with to be able to do that. So it's the grade crossings are the largest and most expensive infrastructure project probably in the city's history. So it's a big deal. Next, I wanted to let folks know that you may have read in the press, but we had a meeting on this last week where we opted to reopen University Avenue to automobiles, but with expanded parklet programs and the intention to keep the half block of Ramona that is closed, keep that closed potentially permanently. We're still looking at permanent plans on these, but it would be October 15th that University would reopen to cars. We've seen that our retailers on University have been suffering even disproportionately to other retail districts and same store sales in other areas. That as much as the community really loves dining in a car-free environment, we're in danger of killing off our downtown if we don't take deliberate measures to try to make this next transition that is not only helping those businesses recover from the economic impact and the reduced office worker volume downtown, but also the changes to retail patterns that have occurred and been accelerated by the pandemic that we're probably all part of. So that's a big deal. On California Avenue, we have elected to continue the closure at least through next June, but with a stated intention that we're inclined to look toward a plan for permanent closure of California Avenue, because it's not a thoroughfare. It's a dead end street because 60 years ago, it was closed off when we constructed Oregon Expressway. It formerly crossed the tracks and was a major arterial, and now the street volume is car volume is very low there, and so it's a different setting from University, and we're in the early stages of organizing a design charrette for what would be both an interim streetscape over the next year or more, and then subsequently a long-term street design, which would be an expensive project to implement, but looking at long-term possibilities on how to make it a pedestrian boulevard permanently. And then we have a few upcoming things that you may be interested in. One is, I think we may have mentioned that we have a transitional housing project in collaboration with Life Moves to draw on the state Project Home Key funds, which are very extensive dollars. And we're looking at a site at what's called the former Los Altos wastewater treatment site. It's down at the end of San Antonio Road. We purchased that land when Los Altos joined our wastewater treatment facility almost 40 years ago. And it's been used for different temporary purposes or been fallow other portions of it. And so a fraction of that site is the candidate location. And we have coming up in a week and a half an action item that I think will authorize application to the state for this grant funding. And so it's if anyone is interested in seeing a similar project, Mountain View has one that came up and went from inception to operation in a little over 6 months. A phenomenally quick site. It's using prefab, but very techy prefab facilities, a whole bunch of services for adults, and even a separate family area. And the whole orientation is to provide 3 to 6 months of housing and then transition those residents to other permanent housing locations. So it's right off of Leghorn. The Mountain View site is just a half block into Mountain View from Palo Alto, and they'd be glad to give anyone a tour who is interested. We're looking at probably 100 or so beds there. Most of them are single rooms. And so it's a pretty major development to address what is surveyed over a little over 300 currently homeless people in our city. Even though there are new people who enter that pool each year, this would be able to really absorb through just a few cohorts, all willing homeless people who would be interested in transitioning. So I think it's a real big development. We're optimistic that it'll happen in a year or less. So that's pretty quick order to go from concept to construction and opening. And Ms. Cotton Gaines has been our lead staff person on this, and it's taken a lot of agility to bring together various city departments in very quick order and collaborate with a nonprofit and the state and the grant writing and do all that to try to rush in our application in time for this next grant proposal. It's basically a much more rapid time frame than we have traditionally been able to accomplish things in Palo Alto, and I think it's a real great accomplishment so far by both our staff and the Life Moves team, who are doing a fantastic job. We also have coming up in late October, I believe it is, the Churchill grade crossing at a council meeting. Chantel, do you recall the date? Is that the 23rd or something like that, late October?
I think so. I can pull it up though. Keep going. I'll
Okay.
find it.
And
That
so,
feels relevant to us.
yeah,
Feels like
yeah,
something we're
it's-
going to want to know about.
it's
Thanks.
right in your backyard. As you may recall, one of the alternatives is to close Churchill. We're also, I should add something I left off on the discussion of Charleston and East Meadow, but one of the things that we were able to elevate in terms of our priorities is pursuing a bike and pedestrian bridge crossing or underpass in the vicinity of El Carmelo and Loma Verde. And in one reason that it's connected to the East Meadow and Charleston grade crossings is because if we close for construction on these alternatives can be for 2 to 5 years. These are just extensive construction periods. So the ability, aside from the long-term design of how these new crossings affect safe routes to school and other bike and pedestrian commuting and vehicular commuting, we have the construction period. And so the concept is to really explore constructing this new bike and pedestrian access so it's complete before we begin construction of the vehicular crossings. And it also has potential to feed into the Ventura neighborhood, and then continue onward all the way to a route to the Bull Park Path and increase our bike and pedestrian connectedness both to all the way out to all of Barron Park and Gunn and the Stanford Research Park. So I'm really enthused about that project that had been on our drawing board for over a dozen years, but wasn't moving forward. And this other process is really kickstarting it. So we would also welcome your input as that moves forward, because it potentially also creates a bike route between Ventura neighborhood and future housing that we're going to be looking at in the NVCAP or the Greater Fries area, and its connectedness to El Carmelo Elementary and middle schools for those kids that don't have great routes to school right now. So I think it once again, it's another project that we're working on that affects you, and in this case, hopefully benefits kids and families that you're focused on.
And the estimated date is October 18th,
Thank you.
as of right now.
So that October 18th is the Churchill discussion. And lastly, I mentioned the NVCAP. We have this coming Monday. That's the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan. And it's for the 60 acres or so that are from Page Mill down to the edge of the boundary. I can't remember which street is the south of Fries. And so we're going a next meeting on alternative plans for that. It's an area where we're going to, we're anticipating very significant housing, which again would potentially affect school populations in those areas. So we certainly encourage you to be following that and even be engaged in that. So welcome that. Oh, and lastly, that reminds me to ask whether you've received your school population update. I forget what week you do it after each year, and I understand that you know, the pandemic disruptions have affected your enrollment trends, but do you have any update on that yet?
I don't think that we do. Well, I don't, but I'll go and check. I think Dr. Austin would have known it. But we'll go back and check, and we can bring that to the next meeting, definitely.
Yeah.
I assume
great.
we'll probably have 14-day numbers at the October meeting. That's usually what we do. I mean, we might have had it at a September meeting, but we only had one September meeting because of the Jewish holidays, and we probably didn't have it yet. So I assume in October we'll have it. They're
Oh, great.
down across the board though, as they are everywhere in the state and everywhere in the country. Just, you know, the population of young people is diminishing in all areas. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. And I think that's all I have to report. Councilmember Tanaka, are there things that I left off or that you would like to add?
I think you covered most of them. The one topic that is kind of fresh off the press here is we had a policy and services meeting. I think, yeah, it was Tuesday. Yeah, it was Tuesday. And I think you guys probably heard about the incident at Fukusushi. You know, one thing that Councilman Greer and myself kind of found just by talking with the owner there was, you know, there's not much that the DA could do. And so one of the things that we made a unanimous decision or recommendation to the council on is to see if there's ways we can give more tools to the DA. We can't, well, I guess not really DA, it would be more it's actually Molly's office, so more of a misdemeanor type of thing. So that's something that it's still very early and the council as a whole has to hear it, but something that we're trying to do to try to stem some of this, some of these issues. That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, and I should have mentioned too that you're probably all aware, but Sunday we was it? Getting my calendar. I think it was, yes, Sunday. We had both National Day of Service, and then at the end that was led by Youth Community Service throughout the community, a whole bunch of really great events. And then YCS helped co-sponsor a interfaith meeting and a big event at Martin Luther King Plaza on Sunday evening. And so that was a special day. And I think that wraps up what today will be a pretty short meeting. Ms. Cotton Gaines, our next meeting date is what again?
All right,
For this?
calendar. And did you want to take public comment on the?
Oh, I'm sorry. I neglected to do that. When you had said we didn't have attendees, I forgot. But yes, are there any public speakers who wish to comment?
Yes, if anyone would like to speak on agenda item 3 regarding the updates, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9. And Chair Burt, we have no public speakers at the moment.
Great. Well, good. Saved by the bell then.
So the next meeting is Thursday, October 21st. And the tentative items at this time, that day is actually the Great Shakeout Day. So we are working on just a very brief presentation on that. It has to do with earthquake preparedness. So yes.
inquiring minds really wanted to know.
I know, I could see your face. So it is some of our emergency services volunteers have been very active in that space, and they are just trying to bring more awareness to the day and just being prepared for earthquakes. So that is going to be a short item on your October agenda, as well as the city Safe Routes to School team. They can provide their annual report, which will be going to council, I think, in November. So they wanted to speak to you guys first, like they usually do. So those are the two things right now. And then I know the ad hoc of Pat and Shaunik are chatting on the collaborations document as well. So that's another item that's pending a forthcoming agenda.
Great. Thank you. And I think unless anybody else has anything, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Everyone, have a great day.